This hearing of the Senate Community Regional Affairs Committee will now come to order. It is now 1:30, Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, in Belts 105. Members present are Senator Gray-Jackson, Senator Giessel, Senator Bjorkman, and myself, Chair Dunbar. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum to conduct business. We take this time to silence your cell phones for the duration of the meeting. Before we begin, I would like to thank Juliana Singh, the Senate Community Regional Affairs Recording Secretary, and Joseph Giesbrecht from the Juneau LIO for staffing the committee today. We have one item of business on our agenda today, an introductory hearing on SB 184, Eliminate Daylight Savings Time by Senator Kawasaki. Do any committee members have any questions before we begin? Okay, so SB 184, Eliminate Daylight Savings Time, is sponsored by Senator Kawasaki. Today we will hear a brief introduction, background information, and sectional explanation from the Senator's staff, Griffen Sukkaew. We will hold invited and public testimony on the bill. Mr. Sukkaew, would you please come forward and illuminate us on this bill? Senator Kawasaki is unable to be with us today, unfortunately. He has another commitment. So we will be hearing from his staffer.
Through the chair, for the record, my name is Griffen Sukkaew, staff to Senator Kawasaki. Senator Kawasaki could not be here today because of prior obligations. He apologizes. Online, I have Jay Pea of Save Standard Time for testimony and to answer any questions. If it pleases the chair, I will now read the sponsor's statement and sectional analysis.
Yes, please continue.
Through the chair, the sponsor's statement reads as follows. Senate Bill 184 would exempt the state of Alaska from the practice of daylight saving time every year. Daylight saving time traditionally is observed between the second Sunday of March and the first Sunday of November. While daylight saving time has been observed in Alaska since 1966, this bill aims to switch Alaska to an observation of permanent standard time. This would benefit Alaskans' mental and physical health, the Alaskan economy, and no longer require a clock change twice a year. Arizona, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands have exempted themselves from daylight saving time. Many other states, including Washington and Oregon, introduced similar legislation this session. I look forward to discussing this issue with the committee. As for the sectional analysis, Section 1, AS 44.12 is amended by adding a section exempting the state of Alaska from observing advanced time, also known as daylight saving time. Section 2 adds an effective date of July 31st, 2024. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for the bill sponsor? Thank you, Mr. Sukkaew. Did a great job going through that quickly because we are burning daylight. So now we have one individual on the line for invited testimony. It's Jay Pea, founder of Save Standard Time in Phoenix, and I assume he's going to be the one giving us this presentation.
I'm through the chair, Senator Dunbar. I'm giving the presentation, and then afterwards, if we could hold questions at the end, that would be great. And JP will be on for that.
Wonderful. All right, please continue with the presentation then.
The first country to implement daylight saving time, or DST, was Germany in 1916. It was done in the hopes of saving energy during wartime. In 1918, the U.S. followed suit after joining World War I, but DST was repealed a year later. The U.S. then used DST during World War II. After World War II, localities were able to choose when to switch between DST and standard time at will. For example, by 1965, 18 states observed DST 6 months a year. Some cities and towns in 18 other states observed DST for 4, 5, or 6 months a year. With that, 12 states stuck to standard time. The Uniform Time Act of 1966 changed all of this. The Uniform Time Act standardized DST start and end dates across the country. This caused 6 months of DST and 6 months of standard time each year. Arizona and Hawaii opted to keep standard time year-round. After this, and a failed daylight saving experiment during the Nixon administration in the 70s, Congress extended DST twice. both in 1986 and in 2007, achieving the 8 months of DST and 4 months of standard time we all know today. There are many negative effects of changing clocks twice a year. Regardless of if we're springing forward or falling back, these changes negatively affect our circadian rhythm. Our internal clocks and metabolisms can take days or even weeks to readjust after a clock change. A 2020 study published in the PLOS Computational Biology Journal found 4 prominent elevated risk clusters, which included cardiovascular disease, injuries, mental and behavioral health, and immune-related diseases such as non-infective enteritis and colitis to be significantly associated with the DST time shift in the United States and Sweden. Most of our day-to-day lives, whether that's work, school, or other activities, are timed with the sun and daylight hours. When we switch between DST and standard time, it creates a misalignment between these activities and daylight. This leads to increased health risks, such as those mentioned earlier. A 2020 study by the American Economic Association on the 2007 DST policy change found that there was an estimated social cost of $275 million a year between 2002 and 2011. Now that we know that changing clocks negatively affects Alaskans, the debate moves to which we should stick with, DST or standard time. This bill would keep Alaska in permanent standard time, and there are many good reasons to do so. There are a lot of cons with permanent DST. Thanks to the 1970s energy crisis in the United States, Congress and then President Nixon enacted permanent DST for 2 years. While this measure had public support of 79% in December of 1973, 3 months later, the approval had dropped to only 42%, and permanent DST in the U.S. was revoked. School children's safety was one of the big reasons this was revoked, as children were now walking to school in the dark. As for if energy is saved during DST, in the past this claim was true because of incandescent light bulbs that were very inefficient. However, the current popularity of LED lights, this claim is no longer true. Additionally, darker mornings increase demand for heat, and brighter evenings increases the demand for air conditioning. Most studies err on the side of DST not saving a significant amount of energy, and some studies even claim it causes household energy bills to increase. Current federal law allows states to exempt themselves from observing DST, which is why Hawaii, Arizona, and 5 U.S. territories observe year-round standard time. However, states are not allowed to move to permanent DST until Congress amends the Uniform Time Act. Lack of morning light can have serious impacts on our daily lives. People require light in the morning to properly tune themselves to the local time. It helps reset our biological clocks. More light in the morning improves physical and mental health. Studies have also shown that sunlight in the morning can help lower risk of metabolic disorders, depression, and cardiovascular disease. Alaska is northerly, and short winter days are unavoidable. This chart shows the difference in morning light across Alaska if we were to implement permanent standard time on top and permanent DST below. Nearly 25% of Alaskans have seasonal affective disorder during the long winter months. Contrary to DST, a permanent standard time would make sunrises earlier, helping to improve the health and productivity of Alaskans. Here's an example of the difference in morning light between DST and standard time in Fairbanks. Additionally, this graphic shows how DST misaligns clocks with the natural sun cycle. Noon no longer means the peak of the sun's arc. Permanent standard time is supported by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, European Sleep Research Society, Center for Economic Policy Research, and many Alaskans from all around the state. In your bill packets, you can find some of the testimony in support of SB 184 we have received in the last couple weeks. Finally, switching to year-round standard time does not require a congressional amendment. This is a quick and effective way to improve the lives of Alaskans everywhere. And then these are my works cited, which I can get to the committee. I just didn't want to make your bill packets huge. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I don't see. I have a question. So, and perhaps this is something that your invited testifier can speak to. But it seems like most of the research is focused on the lower 48, and rightly so. It's where the population centers are. Has there been any studies done in Arctic areas? It does strike me that this argument about light and dark becomes kind of moot when you're talking about Uktiavik, for example, where it sets in December and rises in February, or whenever the exact is. And so, but the change still has the same deleterious health effects. And so I guess my question is, has anyone done any specific research on the impact of daylight savings time in northern regions?
Through the chair, Senator Dunbar, I am currently not aware. I can look into it, and I will also defer to Jay Pea on the line from Safe Standard Time if he has an answer to that question.
Perhaps. So, Mr. P, perhaps we'll have you do your testimony, and then if there is an answer to that, you can work it in.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So here I'm going to, unless there are other questions for Mr. Sukkaew, I will switch to our invited testifier, and that's Mr. P. So, Mr. P, if you could please put yourself on the record and begin your testimony.
Yes, thank you. For the record, my name is Jay Pea. Last name is spelled P-E-A, and I am the president for the nonprofit Safe Standard Time. I am also a co-chair of the Coalition for Permanent Standard Time, which is a collaboration with the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the Society for Research on Biological Rhythms, the Sleep Research Society, and the National Sleep Foundation. Chair Dunbar, Vice Chair Olson, members of the committee, thank you for having me here. And I'm here to ask for your yes vote on Senate Bill 184 from Senator Kawasaki for daylight saving time exemption and restoration of permanent standard time. Standard time is meant to be the honest, natural time indicating where the sun is positioned in the sky, such that 12 p.m. would be as close to 12 p.m. as possible. High noon and 12 p.m. trying to align those so that we can give an honest indication of what time of day it actually is. This also balances the light between the morning and the evening fairly for those who might need it in the morning or in the evening. I will say in particular that everyone needs morning light, but most especially school children, farmers, commuters, people who work outdoors. Morning light helps us wake up and feel alert. It stimulates hormones such as cortisol to wake us up and improve our alertness and reaction times. It can also help us get to sleep on time in the evening. There's a lot of history and science backing standard time as being best for our mood, our physical health, our safety, education, and the economy. This policy is endorsed by the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Neurology, the National Safety Council, as well as many newspaper boards, Bloomberg, Cato, people on the left and the right, other nations as well. The Canadian sleep societies are in support of permanent standard time and not permanent daylight time. And as the good person who preceded me mentioned, it is also approved by federal law. The Uniform Time Act of 1966 permits states to exempt themselves from daylight saving time and restore permanent standard time. Some states get nervous about going it on their own, especially when they have cities on the border, and we recommend to those states that they might delay their effective date based on some other state making the same change to their law. Whether that's appropriate to Alaska would be up to you to decide. But I will say there are more bills than ever across the nation for permanent standard time. We're very close in some states, and I believe once we pass the first in the 21st century, many more will follow. Arizona, Hawaii, and the 5 territories are already there. Mexico went to permanent standard time just a year and a half ago. Most nations are on permanent standard time. For those who might dream of permanent daylight time, I would say please don't consider that. one, it's federally prohibited. Two, when it was tried before in the 1970s, it was a disaster. It was disrupting public safety and business, radically increasing morning darkness and forcing earlier waking. I don't think most people want the government to set their alarm clock an hour early all winter, but that's what daylight time would do. Simply by turning our clocks forward an hour, it means we have to do everything an hour early. So if there are those who enjoy daylight saving time, I would implore them just to start their own work days an hour early rather than forcing everybody else along. As for the question of northern latitudes, I was just looking, and I do see studies showing that there are higher rates of depression at northern latitudes due to the lack of morning light. And this bill for permanent standard time would improve that by increasing morning light, whereas permanent daylight time would worsen that by decreasing morning light. I'm also familiar with the nation of Russia attempted permanent daylight time for 3 years from 2011 to 2014, and they had to give it up and go to permanent standard time due to significant increases in depression and automobile accidents. That's pretty much what I have to say as far as prepared statements. Again, I thank you for having me here today, and I would ask for a yes vote on Senate Bill 184, and I am ready to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I guess, Alaska is already, we're a unique state, right? Us and Hawaii, basically. We have our own, actually we have two of our own time zones. There is some worry that if we go on our own, we will decouple ourselves from places where we do business, the East Coast, for example, or California. A lot of folks work remotely or have business associates on the East Coast, for example. Can you speak to that? And I guess Hawaii is probably the most analogous. How do they deal with that decoupling from the contiguous United States?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. I have not heard any complaints, any news out of Hawaii as far as disruptions to business or confusions or inconvenience to commerce. And so I would presume that no news is good news. I do live in Arizona, although I'm from Iowa. And it is a little confusing when we have to remember if New York is 2 or 3 hours ahead of us, for example. I am confident that once a state in the 21st century exempts itself from DST, many states will soon follow. And I base that on most legislators to whom we speak on this issue aren't aware that standard time is an option, that it's federally pre-approved. So if it can be demonstrated that it is something that is can be done, I believe many states it'll get attention and they'll say, we didn't realize, we'll do this. If it remains a concern for the state of Alaska, then I would ask you to consider delaying the effective date by a year or two, or making the effective date contingent on the state of New York passing the same law, or Illinois or California. Name any one or more states that you feel the strongest business connection to encourage that state to follow suit.
So thank you, Mr. Pease. Another critique I have heard is that, Alaskans, we love to get outdoors. And for a lot of us, there really is no question of morning light. There's not going to be morning light for much of the winter, until we are already at work and working, because the sun rises relatively late here. But if we leave daylight savings, there will be less time in the evening to do the things we love, like hike or ice climb or, jump off a mountain. Alaskans are into some outdoor activities. What would you say to those folks that are worried about losing an hour of daylight in the evening, or around like 3-4 p.m., which folks find very precious?
Thank you again for that question, sir. Alaska is unique, being so far from the equator, that you do have very early sunsets in the winter and very late sunsets in the summer. And I do hear this concern in every state. It seems like everyone is concerned about losing that daylight in the evening, and whether you're in a state where the sunset in the summer would change from 9 to 8, another state would be worried about it being changed from 10 to 9. So it can be very personal in what people want. I'm looking at a chart in Anchorage. Your sunsets in June appear to be almost 12 midnight with Alaska Daylight Time. I'm seeing 11:40, 11:45. So that would become 10:40, 10:45. And I would argue that is still very, very late, with plenty of time to have fun in the evening in the summers. Having it just an hour earlier would actually make it easier to get to bed on time, especially for children and adolescents, where it is harder to get to bed on time when it's so light outside.
Any other questions? Senator Giessel.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just point out we go on daylight savings time in the spring, summer, and early fall. It's kind of a ridiculous time for us to be doing that. If we really want more light in the evening, we'd do it in the winter, which is completely opposite the rest of the U.S. And I also remind many of us, remember this, we used to have 4 time zones in Alaska. Mm-hmm. So 1 time zone is still not accurate in terms of the natural light.
Yeah, I'll say for myself, blessed to have been raised in the interior, and I do not suffer from seasonal affective disorder. I love it when it's dark all the time. I love it when it's light all the time. What I hate is changing my clock. And so we will see if this committee can take some action on that. So thank you, Mr. P. If there are no other questions or comments, I'm going to move on now. We're going to open public testimony, excuse me. We're going to start with anyone here in the room. Let's see here. Is there a Tom Williams? Would you please come forward and put yourself on the record and offer your testimony?
Thank you, Senator Dunbar and members of the committee. My name is Tom Williams. I'm a 47-year resident of Alaska, and all that time in Juneau. I am the financial officer of a company here in Juneau, Ward Air. We're an on-demand air charter. And my wife and I also operate Alaska Northern Sands. It's a vacation rental, so we cater to the visitor industry as well. I'm here to urge you to advance part of this bill. I think the provision that talks about the time change is a very critical thing that we should eliminate in this state. I don't think there's any real benefit about changing from from standard time to daylight savings time. I think there's been numerous reports, as has been evidenced in prior testimony and in prior testimony to previous bills, specifically SB 6 back in 2015, that clearly demonstrate that it's of no real benefit to switch back and forth. However, I do not support moving to standard time year-round, and I'll expound on that a little bit more. Do support staying on daylight savings time year-round. So I guess we know that switching back and forth is not healthy, and I think that's the main concern that we hear. But to change to daylight or to standard time during the entire summertime will have a definite adverse impact on the economy, certainly of Southeast Alaska, where we rely on a lot of tourist business, and we need those people to have time to enjoy this part of the state. And I'm sure that applies to the rest of the state as well. It also applies to the visitors that come and stay at our vacation rental. They want to have as much time in the evening to enjoy as many activities as possible. So I guess the upshot is Well, I'd like to see elimination of the change. If you decide to stay with standard time year-round, I urge you not to advance the bill. However, if the committee can offer a substitute to make this daylight savings time year-round, I think there's several benefits to that, and I'll expound on that if there would be a committee substitute.
Yes, I'm sorry, Senator Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your testimony. And on a personal note, I agree with you because that's what I thought it was all about in the first place, maintaining daylight savings time. And selfishly, I'm not an early morning person. I'm a late night person. So the more light I have in the evening is better for me personally. But regardless, I'd really like to see something change, whether it's standard or daylight, although again, daylight is my preference. Thank you again for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for?
Yeah, continue.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I thought you were done.
To recap, we urge the committee to adopt a substitute that would make daylight savings time permanent, maintaining existing daylight hours in the summer that are critical for Alaska tourist industry and to maximize tourist excursions, and basic Alaskans' evening hours after they go home from work. It would also have a very positive effect specifically on our businesses that operate year-round in the wintertime, because for a flight charters company to be able to operate later in the evening due to daylight is of tremendous benefit. Most people don't want to start off flying somewhere early in the morning. They want to be able to get picked up from where they're going later in the evening, and I think that is a good thing from the business perspective. And it reduces the time zone difference between Alaska and the East Coast financial markets, which is a very good thing by staying on daylight savings time all year-round. I note that back in 2015, when we testified on SB 6, which was similar to the original version here, there was, at that time, there were three states, our three West Coast states, California, Oregon, and Washington, all had adopted language that said, if the Congress will allow us to stay on Alaska's daylight savings time, then we would do that. And British Columbia was also considering that at that, but I don't know whether that's been updated. While I understand that maybe in some of those states there's been other legislation proposed similar to this legislation, I don't think, I'm pretty sure that, well, no, I'm not pretty sure. I would think that the previous provisions that were adopted in those states that says we'll be glad to go on daylight savings time year-round would be still in effect. And I don't think we want to change so that we would be now 2 hours difference from the West Coast. We still need that connection between Washington, Oregon, and California. Those are critical business partners. And with that, I'll encourage you to adopt a committee substitute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any other questions for Mr. Williams? Seeing none, is there anyone else in the room who would like to testify to this bill? Okay, then we will go to Lynn Willis in Eagle River. Miss Willis, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, Mr. Willis, could you please put yourself on the record and begin your testimony?
My name is Lynn Willis. I live in Eagle River, as you pointed out, and I'm representing myself. I've been a long time interested in this issue, and it is a complex and interesting issue in Alaska. But I support this legislation. But this legislation is not new. From my research, I can find out since 1991, there's been HB 4 in the 21st legislature, HB 409 in the 22nd legislature, HB 176, and SB 120 in the 24th legislature. I think we've heard about all the arguments that can be made on this legislation. And the fact is, states cannot change time zones. All we can do is opt out of daylight saving time in that portion of a time zone that lies within a specific state. After the 1983 time zone change, all of Alaska except the Aleutian Islands is in one time zone. so you can take the whole state off of this and we can end this silliness. We are, as has been pointed out by some of you, we live in the land of the midnight sun. That's just the way it is. Also, Alaska is far enough west that you're going, if you want the sun to have anything to do with the position of the sun with the time of day, you're going to have to be in a different time zone. And now, after the 1983 time zone change, which apparently was done to make sure Juneau and the rail belt were in the same time zone, the sun is highest in Anchorage at 2 in the afternoon and highest in Nome at 3 in the afternoon. We have, that's during periods of daylight, that's during periods of daylight saving time. The fact is, in 1983, most of the state was put on permanent daylight saving time, and you can check that out. Now, the Southeast, I understand, wants to stay in the same time zone as Seattle, and there are arguments for that. But we also do business across the Pacific in Japan. And when I worked in the airlines out on that ramp, we had to adjust our schedule because airlines fly on GMT. We had an hour less time to do cargo handling during periods of daylight saving time because the planes were again arriving just when they did the day before as far as Greenwich Mean Time was concerned. And that does get a little bit complicated, but it's true. So I just would like this to pass. I've been, well, like I say, I've been following this for a long time, and it is a bang on your circadian rhythm, and it's absolutely not necessary. And as far as energy savings, who's mentioned daylight saving time in the recent discussions about Cook Inlet natural gas? Nobody. The street lights in Eagle River go on and off by ambient light sensors. The HVAC in most of the buildings in this town are run on computer controls. So there's just really no reason to do this anymore. And I am absolutely flabbergasted that we still want to do this ridiculous practice. It makes no sense. And if you're going to come to Juneau on a cruise ship, you're going to change time zones, and you're going to have plenty of time to adjust to it. And if you're going to come to Alaska, you're going to have to change time zones. And this idea, I know that one time it was even proposed to put all of Alaska in the Pacific time zone. That would be absolutely mindless. So anyway, I urge you to pass this. I don't fall for these canards about waiting 2 years or that we need a study or any of this other stuff to forestall this. Just end it as soon as we can, and I think it would just be one less rock in the public shoe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Are there any questions for Mr. Willis? Okay, let's see here. I want to check the calendar. Okay. All right. Well, with that, unless I don't see anyone else online, I don't hear anyone here, I'm going to close public testimony. All right. If the public has any further written comments, please email us at senate.community.and.regional.affairs@akledge.gov. My intention is to set a amendment deadline for this bill on this Friday, which is March 8th, and I intend to take this bill up again next Tuesday, which is Tuesday the 12th. Are there any? Yes, Madam Chair.
Did you have a time of day on Friday that you were setting the amendment deadline?
Let's set it for 5 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
And we will all get a firsthand experience this weekend. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I'm so used to calling you to end this in the room. Senator Bjorkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under committee discussion of the matter before us, I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Williams and those of us who appreciate time after school and work to go out and recreate in Alaska. Growing up in Upper Michigan, that time after school, we don't have school in June yet, Mr. P here, but that time after school is very valuable for families, for people who enjoy living their life outside. It gives us time in the springtime to drive to the Russian River and fish trout in April. It gives us time to drive to Hidden Lake and fish for lake trout. It gives us time to go out and sit in a tree stand and wait for bears in May. Those opportunities are possible because we have an extra hour in order to do those activities and make those activities worthwhile after school and work. I understand why people don't think that that time is important if they are detached from a life outside, if they are detached from a work schedule that they don't control. If you're able to set your own schedule and work for yourself or do your own thing, that's maybe not something that's as important to you. But that's not the everyday person in Alaska and the everyday person in blue-collar America who enjoys spending time outside with their family. I'm absolutely opposed to permanent standard time because of the opportunities that it takes away from people to do things outside, whether it's rake your leaves, cut your grass, or do any number of things. And as we look at kids doing sports practice, especially in the fall, the late summer, if you will, they would be practicing in the dark. We have many dark mornings here in Alaska, and our social fabric is not falling apart. People aren't running their cars off the road into the ditch. For many months in the year, it's not light until 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. Life still goes on. We live and we work and we play in Alaska because we're Alaskans and that's what we do. Having an extra hour after school and work to recreate is really important, and I adamantly oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bjorkman. All right. So the Senate Community Regional Affairs Committee will meet next on Tuesday, March 12th. There will be no meeting on Thursday this week. All right. So with that, the time is 2:08, and this committee is adjourned.